Hello, good afternoon. How are you? Welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for subscribing. For those of you who are new here, my name is Mama Gigi, or just Josephine. Today I had been planting and mulching trees earlier. It's early afternoon. It's afternoon actually, and I'm sitting here basking. I don't have electricity, so there's so much I could be doing online, but I'm not able to. So I've just been thinking about life and about happiness and what it entails to have happiness. Uh, a lot of people right now have been, for me personally, just talking of my views, I find it so hard that a lot of people still stay in the city and they are going through so much. In Nairobi, they're going through so much to survive, but they have very big plots of land up country, and they they choose to stay in the city, to build in the city, and to continue living in the city. And I'm talking about the group of persons, especially who do not have school going children. A lot of times, children being in school dictates for you how where you're going to live because of proximity to the school, convenience to schools maybe in the city, and all that. But once the children are out of school, and once maybe you're retired, and even if you're not retired, I know having a job is very important, but if you have a family, it's not just you alone, but you're still in the city. I don't understand it. The way the rents are in Nairobi, they are so expensive. Because is that, for example, if it's a family of a couple, and you can opt to separate. If you have land up country, you can opt that one person, if there are children who are of school going age and they are able to school up country in good schools, that might be a bit. I can't say up country schools are any cheaper, but the lifestyle up country is a bit cheaper. So you might opt to have the children's school in up country schools. If it's secondary, all the better. Primary, sometimes the quality of education might be compromised, but for secondary schools, it's even better. And I could say that it's just the same. You're better off if you let the children school up country, and one person can live up country with the children. You can separate as a couple. It's not separate of living one another, but for convenience. Because I know people are struggling, people are barely surviving just to be in Nairobi. And I'm not talking without perspective, because I've spoken to people, I've spoken to couples, and they've told me the hassles they're going through. I've seen people sometimes living in the city and children fail to go to school. Even children in basic primary school fail to go to school, and I'm like, why is this happening? Why are children not? They say we have problems, we have financial problems, we are not able to find work with. I'm like, why are you not opting to move and go up country, and yet you have land? You could start. The fear of many people, I think, is starting from scratch, and that's not a valid fear, because some of them quote fear to the humble life. We are going to live in a house that is so modest. Maybe some don't want to live in a mud house. Maybe some don't want to live in a mabati house. Maybe some of them don't want to be housed until they can put up something. But once you let go of those fears, ask some of us who opted to come and move up country. This is not completely up country, but by the time I came here, and even by many considerations, this is like living up country, being in Ruai, because the life is we have a very modest life, and the difference between me and somebody up country is just very minimal. It may just be land rates, and it may be that a lot more people here, but we are on the outskirts. And I can assure you that a lot of our lifestyle here is the same as a country living. And when I first came here, I lived in a mabati house. I rented from a relative who had a row of houses made of sheets. These roofing sheets. There were 4, and I had wanted the main house, but somebody had taken it. And so I took those 4 houses, but taking those 4 houses cut my rent by half. It was a decision I took because I had worked and I had found that paying rent was so expensive. By that time, 2 children had completed secondary school, and the last one is the one that was now getting into secondary school. And for me, I was going to be alone, and my child would only be home for holidays. So it did not matter. In fact, I wanted to go upcountry to live in Machakos, but I didn't have a personal piece of land. If I had a personal piece of land elsewhere and my marriage home was not available, that's a story of another day. But if I had had personal land upcountry, I would have gone and built a shack of whatever type. And I told myself, my son will only be here for holidays. So I took one room as a sitting room, the other one as my bedroom, the other one as his bedroom, and the 4th one as his kitchen. And we stayed there for a very long while. I think we stayed there for a year or 2 years until we moved now into the stone house, a house almost like this, but bigger, 2-bedroomed, before we started building here. And that's how I learned country living mainly. In my life, where I learned country living the most, I can say, is when we lived in the row of houses, the shacks. It did not have a fence. The toilet was like almost 100 feet away. We were not used to these conditions. There was it was basically a bare piece of land with a house and a toilet. So I had to do a makeshift bathroom near the houses so that when I was alone, I didn't have to walk so far to go to the bathroom. I learned how to use a night bucket, which I would pour outside. And I started farming. And because I started farming, that would mean that most of the day I would be in the farm. I'd work in the farm in the morning from 7 up to around 1-ish. That is when the sun gets very hot. By 2 p.m. at peak, the sun between 2 p.m. and about 4:30. At that time, I knew precisely at up to around 4:30, the sun would be at its hottest. So I'd enter in, eat, rest, and then at 4, around 4:30, around 3, I can't remember quite whether it was 3:30 or 4:30, but that's when within just 20 minutes, the heat of the sun would reduce. Then I'd go back to the garden. And throughout the season, whether my son was on holiday or whether I was alone and working with other people or alone in the garden, that's what would happen. Then we'd go back to the garden, finish at 6, and then I go and bathe. At that point, when we first came here, there weren't as many people as there are now. The land was not as developed. People had not built so much. There weren't fences. So I started growing the fence of that compound, the live fence. It's now completely grown. I started farming, and I think my first harvest we had like 2 sacks of maize. We started, what else? I learned how to cut the fence by myself. And when my son would come in from holidays, we'd do it together. I learned how to clean compound, how to take care of a compound, how to demarcate the compound so that you have the farming side and where you have the house, and then plant a bit of grass. I put up a fence. We didn't have money. I had, this was also, sadly to say, it was a period when I had lost my elder son, when I opted to move. So the moving was also a healing. And doing all this work was helping me to heal. It was myself. It was my therapy. Since we did not have a fence. The houses were very cold. This kind of houses built from corrugated sheets can be very, very cold. And here, because it's hot in Ruai, at night is when the cold would be hardest. So I realized that on the side where there was a tree that was on one end, that room of that side, which happened to be the kitchen, was very warm. And let me tell you that one thing we used to do is that at night when we were going to sleep, I would carry the TV out of the sitting room, because it's a separate door, and the bedrooms are a separate door, and the kitchen. But I persevered because I knew I had a dream. I wanted to build in my own piece of land. This piece of land was bequeathed to me by an inheritance from my mother. So that was my dream, that I'm going to stop paying rent. I'm first going to reduce, and then I'm going to stop so that I can build on my own plot. I got sacks because I could not afford any fence. I could not afford iron sheets. The live fence was going to take long to grow. And I could not grow a live fence in just a small perimeter because it was not my houses. I didn't have the authority to do that. But the live fence on the whole compound, the main compound as demarcated, that one I could grow. So I looked for a little money because I think I used to sell crafts. I used to sell soap. I looked for a little money and I put up a fence of sacks. Like literally sacks. I cut sacks and then I put poles and I created a fence around the house. And believe you me, immediately the temperature of the house moved. And for us, we felt a bit more comfort. I knew that if somebody entered within the small enclave, because there was about 2 feet, the back of the house had a fence, had this thorn fence. You remember what I showed you when I was walking? The kayaba, I think it's called the thorny fence anyway. So I used to trim it and then and then there would be a walking path behind the house. And then now the 3 sides I put with just a small opening on one side going to the bathroom. I put the fence of sacking. And that lasted us for more than a year, but it kept the house warm. And it enabled us, if we were going out at night to the bathroom, because at night that's what my son would not use a bucket. Of course, he was a young man. He was growing into a young man, and me, I'm a woman. It's different for me. But during the holidays when my son was around, we would arrange so that before we went to bed, we'd be able to go to the toilet. I mean, use the place where we were bathing to pee there. Because it was so far to go to the toilet and there was no lighting outside. The lighting would sometimes be on, it would sometimes be off, but it was quite a distance. And if we were watching TV, we used to finish watching TV at 10 o'clock, precisely at 10 o'clock, because there were very few residents in that place and we just could not afford to have any. In fact, it was not 10 o'clock. If I'm not wrong, it used to be 9:30. Yes, it used to be 9:30. Would not let 10 o'clock find us when we had not entered, each of us, into our bedrooms and locked. And I had instructed my son, once he locked, I'd be listening in because I'd be listening in, and then he would make sure that I'd make sure that he pushes a cupboard against the door and then a chair. There are some things I had put for him in his bedroom that on top of locking the bedroom, he had to move them to make sure that so that he secures himself inside. And I tell you that I was just comfortable with the way we were living. And things got better slowly, and we started. I would walk from where I was up to where we now are is about, if I count in meters, it's not a kilometer. It's less than a kilometer, but almost a kilometer. So I made a habit slowly as we developed the land where we were living. We also started fencing now this current land of ours. I tried to see what I could do to invest in it. But it was so desolate. There were no neighbors practically on every side. You could hardly tell where the land ended, where it started. The roads hadn't been properly cut. But what I did is, because the fencing, the fence I told you that is eaten by goats called kalialia, I mean, you just cut and you put into the ground and it grows. So I started planting that in bits. I'd plant it, then the cows would come and eat it, then I'd plant it. But what would tell us the vague marking of the compound was the sisal. So very slowly, me and my son, whenever I'd come, when I'm selling soap, sometimes I'd dedicate a whole day, come with food in a container and some water. If I found a neighbor who had that fence, because you just cut off from one fence and then go and plant, I'd go and ask the neighbor, can I have a bit of what you've cut out? And he'd say yes. Sometimes I'd literally pull what I had cut off from that person's house by hand. I mean, it is so many times that I've been on the road, I'm walking and I'm pulling kalialia behind me, going to plant. But I was dedicated because I could see this day to day, when I would be in my own piece of land and where there'd be a fence, even if it is not completely done and sealed completely, but where there'd be a fence standing. I had that dedication in me, and it drove me, it gave me passion, it gave me hope. So we've come a long way, because I saved up so much on rent, because even eventually when we moved into a stone house, the rent I was paying was still much lower. Into a two-bedroomed house in Ruai was still much, much, much lower than a two-bedroomed I had been paying earlier. And Maki, we had been in Kariobangi South, which is not even a high-end part of Nairobi, but it was still lower. And because the rent was lower, we were able to do much more. And because I was helping the landlady of the house, even though it was a relative, to sort issues of electricity, issues of water, issues of land rates, issues of this, I learned how to sort issues to do with land here in Ruai, and how to install electricity, how to install water, how to do piping. I did everything I could for that house with a passion, with dedication, though I was a tenant. And so all the things that I was doing there and the experience I was getting has helped me now, when I'm in my own place, to know how to manage, to know when to call the plumber, what to tell the plumber, when to call the electrician, how to instruct the electrician, where to do my windows if it's when we are constructing, where to get fundis when we are building, how to fence, how to demarcate land, even the beautification I'm doing now, because I was doing it for somebody else and I was doing it with a plain heart. But you see, all in all, what I'm saying is that because I settled in my mind that I'm going to move to a cheaper place, I'm going to withstand whatever it is I'm going to have to go through living in a different place rather than living in the city. I was at peace with that. My children were at peace with that. And now we started developing mentally, because our focus was not rent, was not exorbitant rent, to the point where immediately during COVID, I think we moved during COVID because rents were going up. I mean, at COVID time, there were no jobs and all my children were home. My son could not go to college. And at that point, my daughter was working and work also got finished during COVID period. But I can assure you that by God's grace, during the lockdown, it was not shortly after the lockdown, is when we managed to finish building. It was a shell of a house by that time. We finished building. We moved in the same day that we put in windows. There was no fence. This fence was all not there. It was raining. We entered this house when you know how you do the dig out around the house? For those who live in Ruai, you know that to dig the foundation, you have to dig deep. We had not had enough money to fill in the dig out around the house. So there was water around It was like the house was an island surrounded by water. The toilet had flooded, but we did not care. We were coming into our own house. The fence, the front part of the fence actually was put in. Was put what? When was it installed? I think at the point before the children could move out of the house to now start my son to go to college, to move somewhere where there was college, and my daughter to start her new place of work. That is when we put up the fence. But we were comfortable, and we are right on the road. We were comfortable because when you're in your own place and you're committed and you want to grow, you will bear and you'll withstand a lot. And it has been a journey and it has not been easy. I mean, now when I look at plants that have grown taller than me, when I know that I can landscape, I can do what we're planning even on developing the house further. I know it is the grace of God, but I also know that we dedicated ourselves and accepted to stop feeling comfortable. And so I'm urging some of you who are feeling comfortable and living in town, paying exorbitant rates. It might not seem exorbitant to you, but it is if you compare that if you were paying half rent tomorrow, or if you are paying no rent tomorrow. You might not, if for example you're paying 20,000 a month in Nairobi and you move to a house that is 5,000, or that is, if it is your own land, you move into a shack that is not so well developed. I would rather, in my opinion, even if it doesn't automatically mean that now you'll have 20,000 to spare every month, because again, there's still going to be something to do in the other house. But I'd rather that instead of you paying 20,000 rent, you're spending only 10,000 every month to now develop the new place which you are at, which is less comfortable, but which is yours. It's a different place and it's cheaper, and your life, your living expenses are lower. I'd really urge you to consider moving out of high rental apartments and homes and into cheaper living, even if it is a bit harder, more difficult life for just a short while. It might be the impetus that sometimes your children need for you to make that decision so that they have more for themselves, because sometimes we as parents, we might be holding children up living in a more expensive place, and when we move to a cheaper place and then the children find places to go within the city, but they get now their own rental, and because they're looking after us where we are, where there's no rent, you find that somehow the circulation of money, uh, liquid funds, is more than when they have to cough up a large amount to help you with rent every month, even if they are tenants in that house. Sometimes you have to set them free by you moving out, going to a lower lower mm, lower service rate lifestyle, so that they may afford to elevate the kind of assistance that they are giving you as a parent. It's a request that I wish to reach so many of you who are friends, who are relatives, who and I'm saying this with a clean heart. I'm not judging you because everybody has different circumstances, but I'm really requesting you, think about it. And I'm able to offer my advice. It might not be a lot, but believe you, trust me, I have more experience than you if you live in Nairobi. I know how you can make it easier when you're out, either living cheaper in a cheaper rental or putting up your own place. And I can tell you so many shortcuts available. It's not just because of what I watch on YouTube or what I watch online or everything, because I have experience, first-hand experience. And because I've lived in a village life setting for so many years, I've listened to so many people telling their story. And through listening, I have learned. So if you're able, if you're willing, if you wish to, reach out. I could give you advice. Advice is free. If you'd like help, I'd be so willing to help in any way that I can. But I'm wishing you happiness. I'm wishing you a bit more frugality. I'm wishing you good decisions. And thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Keep on staying in my channel. And if you have any comments, please put it below. Thank you very much.